Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host, and today I'm really pleased to introduce our author guest, Don Davies. Don, you're well known in the area. You've been in Kimberley for how long?
50 years now.
Okay, so lots of experience. You've written an intriguing third book here, Backpacks and Saddlebags. So just tell me what inspired you to put this series of short stories together.
Keith, I've always kind of lived in the outdoors in my recreational time. And of course, being a teacher in the summer, it gave me lots of opportunities to get out and hike and bike. And I had a real fascination with cycling in particular. And I used to do a lot of long distance touring, cycle touring.
Right. Okay, and so yeah, that was sort of the inspiration for this. Any favorite adventures or things that are recorded in the book that sort of stand out in your mind?
Yeah, I think I had some in particular, like I did a 6-month, 16,000 kilometer cycling trip around Australia. Okay. Circumnavigation of Australia. That was, I think, one of those lifetime trips that was just fascinating. I don't think there are too many people that kind of do that kind of cycling, but I did a cycling trip across to New York from Kimberley one year, cycling up to Anchorage, Alaska. And a number of the trips I did with my wife, who's also on the back cover of the book. We did a hike across England one year, which was so nice. I think it was our 40th wedding anniversary, and just nice to be able to spend all that time with my wife.
Excellent. So she's your adventure partner there?
She is in a number of them, yes.
Yeah. So how many short stories have you got in here?
Oh, Keith, I should have added them up. I'm not sure. I've probably got about at least a dozen trips, some of which are hiking trips. Okay. Multi-day hiking trips. Yeah. Cycling trips, again, would be multi-day cycling trips, yeah.
So as I mentioned, this is your third book. So what motivates you to sit down and write? I know that you have your own quartet, is that correct?
Yep.
You also are busy with a lot of volunteer things as well. How do you find time to write?
I've always had this feeling that it's important to keep moving and keep myself busy. I also came down with a case of multiple myeloma, which I found gave me a lot of time during recovery time. I had to find things to keep myself busy and keep myself interested.
I see.
Yeah.
So that gave you the time to concentrate on this.
Right.
So are these recent, or what kind of time period are we talking about for the short stories that you've recorded here?
They go back a long way.
Okay.
I grew up as a kid in Australia, and I think that probably goes back about the furthest. A solo trip that I did with my brother, where we went out into the Australian wilderness without any food, just with a single shot 22, hoping that we could shoot some rabbits and feed off rabbits, and didn't happen that way, but that goes back quite a ways when I was probably in my late teenage years.
I see. So it sounds like you've had experience with your adventures, hiking, biking throughout the world. You know, and you're based here in Kimberley. How does Kimberley compare to all the other places you've seen?
Oh, Kimberley is a wonderful place. I think it really brings it home to me after I've been overseas or doing some traveling, just to be flying into the valley and see the Rockies and see the Purcells, and there's little Kimberley sitting there nestled up against the ski hill. It's almost as if I take a deep breath and, oh man, I relax. It's wonderful just to use Kimberley as a base. I just love Kimberley. I came here for 1 year originally, broke my leg, my son was born, bought a house. 50 years later, I'm still here.
Good. Well, I'm glad you've recorded many of your adventures for people to read. Now, when it comes to adventure, you've probably had a few disasters along the way. Can you tell me a little bit about some of your most colorful experiences?
Yeah, not so much disasters, I think, as interesting experiences. I really have a feeling that it's very important to introduce young people to the outdoors. And as a teacher, I always had an outdoor club, always had opportunities to get kids out into the bush, because I think, you know, they're the generation that is our legacy. We're handing over a lot to them in terms of keeping the environment healthy. And I think I weave that throughout the book. One particular trip I do remember, we went with a group of 30 kids into Spray Lakes Reservoir.
Okay.
At the time, I was chairing a pool committee in Kimberley, and the people that were working on that project said, look, we have a cabin way up near Shark Mountain, and you're welcome to use that cabin if you wish. And so when we got there, they had two skidoos with, I guess you'd call them...
like toboggans? Or?
Toboggans, yeah. Toboggans that were about 3 feet high and about a foot wide that we could put 3 or 4 packs in.
Yeah.
And so they spent the good part of the day moving those into the cabin. Well, when we got into the cabin, we only got about half the packs into the cabin. The others were back at the parking lot.
Yeah.
And it was a cabin that comfortably would sleep 6. We had 32 people. One kid kept firing wood into the wood stove, making it like a sauna.
Yeah.
And I realized that we weren't going to be able to stay there and have a comfortable experience. So the next day, I spent the whole day just with a skidoo, bringing those packs back to the start of the trip. And it was very, very cold. One night, in fact, it got to 30 below.
Oh my!
And because we hadn't taken a lot of tents or any shelters, the kids did have tarps and that kind of thing. We built snow shelters, built little shelters out of tarps and that kind of thing. And later on, when the students became adults, I had more than one that came up to me and said, look, you know, that trip we did into Spray Lakes Reservoir that time, he said, that was the highlight of my whole school career, he said.
Yeah, so it really shows the value of engaging and really working as a team maybe to get things done, right?
That's right, yeah. And these were 16-year-olds, you know, about grade 10.
Right. Yep. So what like I mentioned, third book, what motivates you to keep writing?
I enjoy the writing process. I often tell people, look, if you ever thought about the process of writing a book, you probably will never start. It can be somewhat daunting.
Right.
But I think you get through that. I think the important thing is you take your time. You find an editor that can point out things to you that you need to change and you need to really work on.
Right.
My daughter is excellent that way. She herself is a good writer and professional photographer, so she's been very, very helpful.
Oh, excellent. So your book is backpacks?
Backpacks and
saddlebags. So which do you prefer, backpacks or saddlebags?
It's like asking, you know, what's the best taste in a fruit salad? I don't know. It's
you enjoy them both?
I enjoy them both.
Okay. Yeah. So let's just explore that for 1 second. What's your favorite hike within the Kimberley region?
Within the Kimberley region?
Yeah.
Years ago, the height of the Rockies was having a real problem with logging companies wanting to get in there and take a lot of the logs out of that upper valley above White Swan. And there were numerous environmentalist people like Rick Careless, Bob Jameson, Pat Morrow. They got together, and the beauty of that region just didn't deserve to be logged and you know, put into the shape of a bad haircut. So a number of us got together, I guess, and started to pressure the government to pull the logging companies and impress upon them, I think, that there's a rare beauty in this area, and we need to preserve it.
Right, so the height of the Rockies is preserved, is it?
The height of the Rockies is now preserved,
Yeah, okay.
A lot of work to get to that point.
Yeah, yeah, good. And what about the saddlebag side of it? What's your favorite biking adventure in and around the Kimberley, maybe Kootenay area?
Kimberley area, yeah. I used to do a lot of trips in the Pacific Northwest. When I was going to university and summer school, I would ride back and forth to Vancouver. I think my favorite one around this area, probably, I did a number of trips, say Jasper. I think cycling to New York was a very interesting and exciting one. That took me away from this area. I left my family behind. My daughter was coming to meet me on the time when I was to arrive in New York. I didn't time that too cleverly. I really hadn't figured out how many kilometers I had to do in order to be there when she arrived. I got there the night before, and I was doing over 200 kilometers a day to make sure I got there. So,
Oh, good for you.
Yeah.
So New York's a little bit beyond the Kootenays. Tell me a place where you'd like to go. Maybe you haven't biked there yet. Any place locally that you'd still like to bike?
yeah, I always had on my bucket list to ride down to the tip of South America.
Okay.
My days of long distance cycling, I think, have to be restricted now because of the condition that I have, which is a health condition that would make it difficult for me to achieve that.
Right. But you've got a lot of memories recorded in that book, and what's been the initial reaction? I know the book is just out. What are people thinking?
It's amazing. I think there are a lot of people that like to live vicariously through adventures. One of the examples of that, I think, is Center 64 has a regular series of Have Camera Will Travel. And a lot of local adventures. In fact, I went to one about 2 weeks ago. 2 young guys who traversed the Purcell Wilderness through from Revelstoke right through to Dewar Creek.
Yes.
A multi-day trip. And you always fill that studio whenever there's anything related to the outdoors. People just want to come and lap it up. Maybe they can't do it themselves, but maybe vicariously they get enjoyment out of watching somebody else's adventures.
Yes, and I think they'll enjoy reading your adventures again. So congratulations, Don. Third
you.
book. Just tell us the title again.
Backpacks and Saddlebags.
Well, congratulations. A series of short stories about adventures that you've enjoyed over the course of your lifetime. So congratulations, Don.
Thank you.
A great effort, and I know people will enjoy it. Your book will be available at local bookstores, so I'm sure people will look forward to picking up a copy. Thanks again for being our guest.
Thank you, Keith.
This has been Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. Welcome to Talking Kootenay Books. My name is Keith Powell. I'm your host. And today I'm really pleased to introduce our guest, Colin Cartwright. Colin, you're from Canal Flats, is that correct?
That's correct, yeah.
Colin, you and I have been working hard to get together to do this interview for some time, and I appreciate you taking some time to be here today. So you're the author of 2 books, fascinating books, because they really delve into a lot of history and a lot of stories about our local area. They have a real local flair to them. So the first book you published, Empty on the Swan, A Trucker and Logger's View of the White Swan Road. So a lot of people know the White Swan Road, so we're going to talk about that. Your second book is Kootenay Bears, and I understand you have a third book coming up. We'll talk about that a little bit later as well. Okay. So Colin, tell me, what inspired you to write the book about the White Swan?
Well, I've been associated with the White Swan Road since it was built. My father and uncle were involved in the construction of it, and most of my working life has been involved with in one way or another, with the White Swan Road.
I see.
And every corner and hill and what have you on that road has a name or a story or a history behind it. And you know, this was being lost as time went by. The old timers that were involved and put the names and stories to the corners were dying off. There was very few left. And I just thought it was history that should be recorded and you know, looked after for future generations.
Well, good for you for documenting it. You know, just for those that are geography challenged, maybe like myself, give us a reminder as to exactly where the White Swan Road is in that area.
Well, the White Swan Road is about 5 kilometers south of Canal Flats, or what would that be from Cranbrook, about 75 kilometers from Cranbrook. And it accesses the White Swan Lake area and also the White River drainage areas and the other side valleys and what have you, the Blackfoot and other areas,
Sure.
parts of the White River and so on.
So when was the road actually built?
The road was built in the about 58 it was finished. It was started in about 56. And that took it as far as the White River, the crossing at the White River. And then it was built in stages beyond that and extended up into the various drainages and parts of the White River area.
So a lot of these stories that you tell and talk about come from first-hand knowledge. You had a lot of involvement in the construction and have worked on those roads over the years?
Well, not so much the construction, because I was pretty young at that time, but having worked on it, especially in the last 25, 30 years, I was involved with the road maintenance and of it. So I was doing plowing, sanding, road repairs, this kind of thing. And you get all kinds of things happening on the road, the various accidents and things that happen, and and I was involved with numerous rescues, some of it out of the canyon that is fairly famous, some from the hot springs, some from White Swan Lake itself, and so on.
So the White Swan Road goes right by Lucier Hot Springs, right?
It goes past the Lucier Hot Springs, which is quite an attraction, it seems to be, and not just local, but almost worldwide now. Right. We used to sometimes just call it the cesspool or something, because it is kind of it's a sulfur spring. Right. And it is a good attraction. It's a nice pool and so on, but it does. There's a lot of abuse, you could say, on the roads and so on. People. Right.
Well, that road is what, a Forest Service road, is it?
It's a Forest Service access road, yes.
Right.
Yes.
But it is an all-weather road. You could drive there all year.
Oh yes, yes. We used to maintain it, and we still do. Well, I'm retired now, but we used to maintain it year-round. Yeah. And we'd also maintain part into the parks that are there and this kind of thing.
So it's a gateway to Top of the World Park, is that correct?
Yes, the Top of the World Park can be accessed from there, from several directions actually, if you know the way to get to it. Yeah. And also all the numerous other places that you can, there's hundreds of miles of road and so on, and beautiful creek draws and mountains and to climb and various things.
Spectacular country back in there. So any particular story in the book that sort of stands out in your mind?
Some of the rescues that we did out of the canyon really stand out. Where we've had vehicles that were down. The one was down about 600 feet below the road.
Oh boy.
And we had to go down and get the people out and bring them up. And there was 3 people. It took us an hour for each person to get them up out of there. You had to have stretcher, rope tied to the stretcher, and 8 people on the stretcher and spell off and so on, because it's almost straight up and down.
Yeah, that's rugged country in there for sure.
It is, it is, yeah. And,
interesting. So you've seen lots of things happen over the time. Hand in hand with the White Swan is your second book, which is Kootenay Bears. Tell me about that and what's the connection?
Well, it's a totally different sort of a story. This is more of a series of short stories with my personal experiences with bears over the years. And I've spent most of my life in one way or another in the outdoors and, working, hunting, fishing, camping, climbing mountains and so on. And you're always going to, somewhere in point in time, you're going to come up with an experience with bears. Mm-hmm. And having sat around hundreds and hundreds of campfires, telling stories and listening to stories and what have you, invariably bear stories come up. Yeah. That seems to be the thing that people are most interested in. And finally, I had, with some of the ones, or a lot of the ones that I have had experiences there, people said, well, you should maybe document some of this, write it down. There's for a lot of people, a bear experience is seeing one beside the road in the park. Mm-hmm. It's a whole different thing when you are the subject of a sow grizzly bear that doesn't happen to like you and makes a charge at you. Right. Or sitting on the top of a mountain, breaking daylight, which is one of the stories in here, and looking over, and there is a grizzly bear comes out and sits about 40 or 50 yards away. Mm. And we enjoy the sunrise together. It more than myself, because I was what you would call somewhat nervous.
Yes, no, don't get me.
The other thing about in this, there are no actual photographs in there, because anytime I've been close enough to, or in close quarters with a bear, the last thing I'm usually worried about is taking a picture.
Right.
I'm looking for an easy way out, or hoping I don't have to shoot this thing or something. So my daughter did all of the illustrations for that book.
Yeah, I was going to ask you about that, because you had told me that in the past. So she's quite an artist. She illustrated the book for you?
Yes, she did. And what I did is I just gave her the rough copy when I was writing it and said, if you can think of anything that would make a good picture, go ahead and draw one. So I didn't coach her or anything else, and that's just what's
she did a lovely job. They really add something to the book. So, so the 2 books that you have out right now, I understand that you're working on a third. Just give me a little bit of a glimpse into what you're planning in the future here.
Well, I've actually got 3 that are started. One that I'm trying to get finished right now. Okay. And that is experiences over the years. We spent many, many years with our horses and so on, making trips into the backcountry. Okay. And we would just pick a place on the map that we hadn't been before, and away we'd go and hope that we could make it through and so on. And so we covered most of the country from the St. Mary's, the Dewar Creek, the Skookumchuck, the Finley Creek, the Dutch Creek, the Toby Creek, the Assiniboine, Palliser, Middle Fork,
So you've rode a lot of the trails that make up the Kootenays.
That's right, and the one thing, of course, I mean, it's interesting, this sort of thing, but a lot of the old people that we'd met over the years, and places that we'd been, and some of them you can't get to anymore in that mode of travel. You can drive to some of the places where we used to sometimes spend 2 days on a horse to get there. And some places you're not allowed to go anymore, and this kind of thing. So it's sort of a documenting, in a way it's a history thing too, because I talk about some of the old guides and the old people that I'd met, and like I was saying, with some of the people around Assiniboine, and what have you. So
lots of colorful characters undoubtedly you've met on the trails over the years, probably be included in your new book. Any glimpses into the future books?
Well, there's another one that I have started, but I finally made up my mind I have to finish one book before I continue with 3 of them. So I'm trying to finish this.
Okay. Well, we look forward to that. I think you've also told me in the past, Colin, that anytime you deal with a horse, a story comes with it. What did you mean by that?
Well, anytime that you're around some of those knotheads there's always something happening. Somebody's getting bucked off, or the pack gets bucked off, or something runs away, or you run into a bear or a moose, and you have a rodeo, and there's just always something. You're saddling up or packing up, and the horse stands on your foot, or sometimes, for example, like we were in one of the draws in the very top end of the headwaters of Dutch Creek in the first week of August, and we got snowed in. Okay. A foot of snow. Same thing in Assiniboine. We got, at the time we were over the other side in Bryant Creek, and had to come back over into the Mitchell, and it snowed, and we stuck for 2 or 3 days. We went over the top, and it was about a foot of snow, and that was the first week of August.
Really? Well, congratulations, Colin. Your books are a good read. I really appreciate the fact that you capture so much of the local sort of feel or history of the Kootenays. And before I wrap this up, I want to ask you, why do you think it's so important that we preserve these stories?
Well, this whole area, there is so much history and so much beautiful country and so on. And the history is slowly being lost, except by those of us that do the best we can to record it. And a lot of this country that I've traveled and other people have traveled and so on is remote enough that most people will never see it. They're not either prepared or able or whatever to go into some of this country and make it back out. Right. And it gives people an insight into that sort of thing, and it also, I think, helps people to understand that there's more than just highways and traffic and stuff, that there's places that should be preserved and looked after and remembered for for what they are.
So you really enhance the wilderness experience that we sometimes takes for granted in the Kootenays.
Well, that's right, and it's a shrinking area. There is more industry, there is more roads, there's and I was part of the industry for most of my working life. But in a sense, that almost helped me to see that there are places that have to be preserved.
Right.
I mean, for future generations and my grandchildren and their grandchildren,
Right.
to still be able to go out and maybe see a grizzly bear on the slide.
Right, enjoy that experience.
Yeah.
Well, thanks again, Colin, for being our guest. Certainly your experiences, firsthand knowledge of the area is so valuable. Thank you for documenting it. Well, I've personally enjoyed your books immensely and would recommend people read them. They do really have a flavor to them that captures sort of the essence of the valley. And I look forward to your upcoming book as well. So thanks again for taking the time to be here. It's a pleasure to have you as a guest today.
Okay, and just one other thing. There's only a few of the swan that are left. I don't have many left, and there's a number of the Kootenay bears. But when they're gone, they're gone.
Right. So they are self-published, and it sounds like the run is almost gone.
The run is gone.
Well, good work. Stories that people will enjoy for many years to come. So thanks again, Colin. It's great to have you here.
Okay, thank you.
So this has been Talking Kootenay Books, and my name is Keith Powell.